How's it going, Diablo player? So the Season 6 2.0 PTR is over, and I want to share my feedback with you guys. And I have to say, overall, I'm not really too happy about the state of the game in 2.0. I like some of the changes, but most changes I find to be rather useless and actually terrible for the game. And I really hope they're gonna do something about all the problems which appeared in the 2.0 PTR. But yeah, we will see that in like roughly 3 weeks from now, correct? That being said, I want to go right into the feedback, and I divided this video into sections, so if you want to jump to a specific section, just check the description down below and check out the content you want to see. So without further ado, let's start with my first point of feedback, and that is the PTR itself. So one of the positive things, this was by far the best PTR we ever had. However, it could have been like an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, but why on earth are the unique items, which are the most important for everything to test, just item level 640? It is just not understandable to me how you can make such a mistake. Everything is great, you have the vendor, it sells everything you need, you can do the boosting, you get the glyphs, you get your runes, you get everything you want, but you mess up the chests with the unique items and the legendary items being most important, and you just give them a random 640 item power, which doesn't even make sense. Why 640? I would understand to be like 540 because that was what the old gear was squished down to, but 640 makes no sense whatsoever. Also, we do not have access to all the items from the Infernal Hordes at all. I know Infernal Hordes was not in the PTR, which was the second big blender they made. I guess it's kind of forgivable because it seems like the PTR was a state before Season 4 where Infernal Hordes actually didn't really exist, so probably there's some reason why it's not in there. I don't think they just stupidly forgot that. That doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, at least then in the PTR cache, we should have the items from the Infernal Hordes, the new uniques. We cannot even get the Shard of Rarity and stuff like that, because it's simply not in the game. I mean, you can hope for a random drop, but you know, that's not gonna happen, right? So yeah, if they would have gotten that right, outside of some stupid stuff that you have to reset your like settings every time you restart the PTR, it was actually pretty good. So I hope going forward, if they just fix the vendor, which gives you everything, and it gives you Ancestral gear instead of random 640 gear, I guess we can be pretty happy if the PTRs are going to be in this state going forward. So next up is leveling in Diablo 4 2.0. The leveling experience overall was pretty good. It felt a bit long because there was really nothing else to do but Helltide, but maybe that is just for Infernal Hordes not being there. My assumption is Infernal Hordes is going to be there in the leveling phase when 2.0 actually goes live. But yeah, it took me roughly 4.5 hours to go from level 1 to level 60. I could definitely did it a little bit faster because I messed up some Helltide opening chests and stuff like that. I did not use the Stronghold leveling bug. I don't think that's gonna be live, so I know you could level with Strongholds much faster. So what did I do? First of all, I immediately switched to the highest difficulty available, which was Expert, and it was absolutely no problem. So the difficulty scaling there is kind of odd. I would much rather like the difficulties to scale higher and give more XP bonus. Like at least double or maybe triple the XP in Expert, but also make it 3 times as hard. So there's actually a challenge of trying to progress harder instead of just right away picking the highest difficulty and call it a day. Then for whatever reason, the Penitent difficulty wasn't unlockable until level 50. I feel like it didn't really make a whole bunch of a difference, so it should just unlock from the very beginning. The really boring part about the leveling in Helltide was that the items are literally irrelevant in the very beginning. So if you look at these items, they basically have like 11 life and completely garbage stats, and if you compare to the Tempering, which is already 120 to 140 life or something like that, they are just completely irrelevant until they hit item level 600. So all the items before item level 600 are very irrelevant. And the odd part is that it's very hard to reach the armor cap before reaching item level 600. So for whatever reason, there's a random jump on item level 600 there. Other than that, you know, the leveling was pretty much as expected. I played a Hydra Firewall Familiar build. After I hit level 60 after around 4.5 hours, I straight jumped into the tier 20 pit to unlock Torment 1. Then I just got some 750 items from Helltide And I straight jumped into Pit 35 to unlock Torment 2. And, then you're probably going to go farm somewhere in between the Pit tier 40s for a little while. Because directly jumping to Torment 3 is a little rough without any kind of gear and not having all the Paragon points and stuff like that. So yeah, to sum it up, leveling was a little boring. With Infernal Hordes, leveling will probably be nice. So I kind of like the process of leveling in this iteration of the game much more than before. So that sums it up for leveling. Next up is probably the most important change in 2.0, the stat squish. So I guess you really can't say anything other than the stat squish just miserably failed. Numbers are just much higher than before because we just got so many more multipliers and all the additive damage is just completely out of control now. So it seems like the stat squish is really literally reverse. So even though the stats are lower, the numbers are just so much higher and you're just stacking multipliers on top of multipliers on top of multipliers and it's just completely confusing and it's just not a good system to scale your damage and itemization. It is just not good. It wasn't good in the past, and now it's even worse. Just look at the footage from Rob here in the background with like the infinite numbers. Obviously, that's a bug, but stuff like that is caused by this whole story with the multipliers. And we're gonna have a section about multipliers after this. I'm just gonna rant a little bit about it right now. As you can see, even with my Ice Shards build, I hit for like 300 millions, and the Lightning Spear numbers are just all over the place. So I can just say the stat squish miserably failed. It is worse than before, and Blizzard, please fix it. And I just talked about it. Next section is gonna be multipliers, 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 and why are all these multipliers so horrible for the game? So let's talk a little bit about what, in my opinion, is the worst for Diablo 4, and that is multipliers. So most other ARPGs focus on, you get like kind of a percentage bonus damage, 100% damage here, 50% damage here, 20% damage there. They focus on attack speed and they focus on something like crit chance and crit damage. And that is a very good concept to success. And then these games usually have multipliers, but they are very hard to get. Like for example, in Path of Exile, the multiplier is called more damage. And it's, you're not going to get more than like 20, 30, maybe 50% of those, but it's very hard to get. And the problem with D4 is, you get these multipliers everywhere. Your goal is basically to get the biggest multiplier on every item, on every Paragon glyph, on every skill node possible. So it really just involves stacking multipliers on top of multipliers, multiplying with even more multipliers to get like crazy high damage numbers. And that is the main cause for all these, first of all, double dipping, triple dipping bugs, like the cause for the very, very high damage numbers, the cause for pretty much every unwanted interaction in the game, and also the cause for that it's so hard to even notice if your build is advancing. Like if you're already doing like 20 billion damage numbers and you just stack another 30% multipliers, even though those will go to like 30 billion or whatever, you're not even gonna notice it, even because the range of the damage numbers also is so high. Like it starts at 10 billion and goes up to like 60 billion, and that can be just one single hit. And this is just not healthy for the game. And now with 2.0, they promised us the big stat squish and the numbers are going down. But then they basically add even more multipliers. We get a new helm with another 60% multipliers. All the new Paragon glyphs are gonna have more multipliers. The additive damage bonuses are just crazy. So it's just multipliers, multipliers everywhere. And it's so unhealthy for the game. I really cannot express more. The best for this game would be just remove the multipliers altogether. Remove all of them. Take every single X multiplier out of the game and replace it by additive stats. And, make additive stats much lower. Start the additive stats at like 5 to 10%. And, a very good item or a good glyph might give like another 50 or 100%. But remove the multipliers. Just go back to the additives. And maybe just keep some very rare multipliers. So maybe just make a unique item or an uber unique item, basically giving you a 10% X, like a 10% multiplier. And maybe make it so that there's maybe like 3, 4, 5 sources of like 10 to 20% multipliers, but that's it. Don't throw these multipliers on pretty much everything you can find. It's just freaking boring. I feel like it's a cry for help that Blizzard cannot fix itemization, and they basically realized that their system isn't working out, and now they're basically stuck just, we already have like 30%, 40% multipliers on pretty much every single gear piece. So the only way they have to make better gear now is just to add bigger multipliers and even more multipliers. And it's just not working out. So they better cut their losses now, remove the multipliers altogether, and work on an interesting damage and power scaling system. Because this, what they gave us with the 2.0 PTR, is not interesting. It's just totally overtuned. It's boring. It's unintuitive. And I feel like the progression is not even there. Okay, so sorry for that rant about the multipliers, but I really feel like it's time to revamp that system entirely. And next up, it's gonna be the new Ancestral itemization system. So talking about the new system, which is basically making everything which is not an ancestral item completely useless, I don't really like it at all. I like the idea of making ancestral gear more rare, but I don't like the idea of invalidating the other gear. So the way it is right now is all gear is basically item level 750, and ancestral gear is item level 800 with a guaranteed greater affix. So the problem is that the 750 gear can only be tempered once, and it can only be masterworked to 4 out of 12. So since D4 mostly evolves about getting certain unique items, you basically have to get these unique items in an ancestral version, and they are very, very, very rare. So I did like Varshan runs, and I did like 30 runs, and I think I found like 4 ancestral uniques total, and that was on Torment 4. So I just feel like that is way too low. Maybe it should be doubled or maybe tripled, because it is going to be a very, very long grind to even just get a single ancestral unique. And then, you know what? You have to get the proper rolls. So, for example, if you want to farm a Tarasha ring, you want to have one close to 25%, right? So if it already takes roughly like 30 to 40 Varshan summonings to even get a single one which is ancestral. And then, you probably need to do this like 10 or 15 times to just get one which gets close to 25%. Well, you know what? People are not going to do it. It's going to get boring. It is something for people who want to play the game the entire day, but it's not for the average person. What that means is you basically limit the average person to get high-level gear, and you're not even limiting them, you're excluding them from getting that kind of gear. I get the adrenaline effect if you get it to drop, and it's very nice, but just make it a little bit more common than basically not being possible at all. Also, I don't like the idea of limiting it from tempering and masterworking. From tempering, I don't like it at all. It should be just tempering 2 times, just like all the other items. Because you know what? The second tempering is usually not even that strong, so it's not a huge difference in power level. It feels just invalidating those items just even more. With the masterworking, you know what? Masterworking is so expensive. You're not gonna masterwork your 750 non-ancestral item to 12 out of 12, but you should at least let people do it. Because if you cannot find a certain unique in an ancestral variant, just let me masterwork it to give me like a little bit of an edge. I don't really see why you would limit those at all. Furthermore, what I feel like is, if you drop these non-ancestral items, which are basically never going to be used at all in the late game, give me a way to either auto-salvage them, have my pet salvage them, just like it does in Diablo 3. Give me something to just remove these. I know you did it on the tormented bosses and they don't drop at all. I don't feel like that's the right way, actually. I would much rather have like a soft loot filter where these items just auto-salvage, transform into materials, something meaningful. Just don't litter me with those items when I never want to pick them up. It doesn't feel good, it just feels bad. So overall, I like the idea of, making ancestrals more rare, but to sum everything up, I feel like the drop chance is way too low and the casual players will never get this gear at all, and I feel like that's not the right way. So let's get into the next topic, which is Runewords. So let's talk about runewords. First of all, these are not runewords, and I really don't like that they use the same meaning. And I know a lot of Diablo 2 players have been ranting about this, and I want to kind of join the club here. So runewords in Diablo 2 were something very, very meaningful, and runewords in Diablo 4 are essentially just some random stat stick. So, but first of all, let's start with the runes. So, why is there 45 runes, but the rune inventory does only have like 33 spots? That doesn't make any sense. So, either remove runes so they all fit in the inventory, or make the inventory larger. This way, totally lackluster. I feel like it's unacceptable. Then, one more thing, I generally like the concept with the whole generator spender story. The problem here is that most of the runes are completely worthless, they are way too conditional, and the good runes, basically the spender runes, are all pretty much outclassed by 2 runes, which basically give you Warcry and Petrify. So why are those 2 the strong runes and pretty much used in 99% of the builds? You guessed it, multipliers, multipliers, multipliers. We already talked about multipliers, so it feels like really boring that pretty much 95% of the builds just use these 2 combinations, because these 2 skills just give you the biggest multipliers, which leads us back to the problem of the game. You know, if you would have given us something more interesting on the runes, like something like, you know, triple projectiles on a proc, you know, if you like get a Southern offering, your next skill is gonna launch in a Nova, like from the center house, and you're gonna launch like 50 frozen orbs in all directions or whatever. Like, just give us something interesting. What we have received now feels way too weak. It's just like basically another way of getting another 50-60% multipliers up, and that's pretty much it at this point. I feel like this is something you can build on. You can take the runes, you can make better ones, more interesting ones, but still, why does it have to be runes? It could be just the same inventory as vampiric powers have been in Season 2. The whole generator spender story, it's in there for the reason of being there, but it's not in there to actually make it difficult to activate those runes or anything. It's just like another attempt of adding more depth to the game, but it, again, miserably failed. So it's a nice little twist, but you have to come up with way, way, way more interesting runes than the ones you made. And, you know, that is probably something we can build on. So now let's get to my last point, which is going to be the new Paragon boards and the new Paragon system. This is actually one of the things I like, so let's get right into that. So for the new Paragon system and the leveling, where we actually need to get the points, I like that system. I really like having to grind for power. And with the new glyphs, you know, leveling up all the glyphs to up to level 100 gives you a nice little thing to do. You feel like you're doing progression all the time, and you know, even the glyphs getting an additional multiplier at level 46. I don't like that at all. I don't like the multiplier. I like that they get like additional radius. I wouldn't have added this additional multiplier. We already have way too many multipliers, but I'm not talking about multipliers right now. So I really like this whole progression system, you know, picking your glyph, leveling it up, becoming more and more strong, you know, getting more Paragon boards, adding the new Paragon boards over time as you are getting stronger. I feel like that is a really good system. It makes the beginning of a season way more interesting, and that is the problem D4 has right now. You know, the beginning of the season is interesting, and then after 2 weeks, you know, it's all boring. Everything is figured out. Nobody cares anymore. It's gonna make this period of the beginning of a season being interesting a little bit longer. So it maybe prolongs it to like 3 weeks, or even maybe even 4 weeks. So I really like that. I don't really like that it's just a limit of 4 boards. I feel like it should be a 5th additional boards, as many other people already stated, because if you have like 220 points, you can already pick everything, and the other points are fairly meaningless. You're just going to pick a little bit more main stat. So maybe we want to add 1 more board to the pool, and then it's pretty much alright. What I don't like is the board diversity right now, because the way it's set up right now, for example, I can only speak for the sorcerers now. So you're always going to choose the exact same boards except for 1. So right now in the setup, you will always use the same 3 boards, because those are the ones which have generic multipliers on them. Talking about multipliers again. And then you have 1 extra board, which is going to be different, either if you're going to play lightning, frost, or fire. But the diversity in the boards is literally non-existent. You pretty much build the same stuff every single time. You're probably going to choose the same 4 out of 5 glyphs every single time. And that is just not good for build diversity. And I feel like it backfired in the wrong direction there. That's definitely something to work on in the near future. Maybe changing those glyphs a little bit to make them a little bit more, towards the builds and not so generic with all those generic multipliers. But yeah, that was everything about Paragon boards. So now I want to sum it up and talk about if it's enough for full price expansion or not, what we are actually getting. So now I want to sum everything up, and now I want to say, is what we are getting actually enough to justify a full price expansion? And in my opinion, it's a clear no. I feel like what we're getting in 2.0, other than the new class, is not even enough for a single season. So what we are getting for content-wise is less than we have received on, for example, Season 2 or Season 4. We're getting some runes, which is less than, for example, the vampiric powers have been in Season 2. It's really less than that. We are getting one new Paragon board, which is, it's just one, right? I expected at least 3, if not 5. We're getting 1. We're getting 1 new skill per class. I expected at least 3. I feel like 1 skill per class, especially playing Sorceress. You have 3 elements, right? You have cold, you have fire, you have lightning. You want to make 1 new board per skill. And you want to make 1 new skill per element, for example. Just giving us 1 new skill and some generic passives, well, thank you, Blizzard, but it's not enough. It's not enough to justify a full-priced expansion. This is basically just a patch, but this is never an expansion. We're getting a new area on the map. Yeah, alright. Is anybody going to care about that after, the first 15 minutes playing through those areas? Probably not. Then we're getting the new raid system. We don't know what it's going to be, so I cannot really make any justice call here. So maybe it's going to be freaking awesome and cool, and it's going to justify the price for an expansion, or it's just going to be random and boring. We don't know at this point, but it's probably going to be one of those. We are getting a stat squish? Well, not really, right? Like, itemization hasn't really changed at all. It's still pretty much exactly the same. And, well, last but not least, we're getting some random new aspects, which are pretty much worthless. Most of them are not even doing anything, because they just have generic damage numbers on them. So, not so excited about that. And that is going to be it. So overall, I just feel like I'm pretty disappointed. Yes, the balancing has been changed. Yes, pit materials now drop in nightmare dungeons, and, glyphs are now leveled up in the pit. So we're basically just swapping some stuff around. But overall, really, there's nothing new. We didn't really get anything new other than the new class and some random skills. And I feel like that is just not enough to justify a full-priced expansion. This is enough for a good patch, but for an expansion, it's just lackluster. It kind of, to me, feels like that, guys at Blizzard have kind of figured out that, the game is not as good as it should be, and now they're just trying to make the most money out of it by selling us random patches as expansions, and they probably want to do this every year because, this strategy looks pretty good for shareholders, I guess, but it doesn't look any good for the players. Anyway, there you have it. That's my feedback for the PTR and the expansion. I'm sorry that it's so negative, but I really cannot find a lot of good stuff in here. So for now, thank you so much for watching, and I see you guys next time.